what is your position right now defines your state of being.
Okay.
And that state of being, if, like I said, you're on the path of becoming who you really are, your past gets corrected and you have no fear of future, then state of being is called fulfilled.
And welcome back. Thank you so much for joining. Today's going to be an extremely amazing episode. Here we have Ali, who is a colleague of mine. He is also known as Dr. Pitafi. And I would like to describe him as a thinker, but more importantly, as a man of reason. Thank you, Assalamu alaikum, Ali.
Walaikum salam wa
Thank you
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
for joining me.
How are you doing?
So we have a lot to cover today. And most importantly, I want to start off with this story that you told me that you used to, have a nice, potentially, stable job in Dallas, and you had a house there, and then now suddenly you got rid of all that. You don't have a house, and you call yourself essentially a nomad. How can you? Where did that come from? How did that, come about of becoming a nomad?
Okay, that's kind of loaded question for me.
Of course,
Okay,
we can start.
now it's gonna go back to my background, right?
Sure, of course.
Okay, I was born and raised in Pakistan,
Yep.
right? You know that, right? Now I belong to a kind of middle class family from Pakistan, right? I graduated from there. I became a physician, right? And then I came over here to the United States. And then once I did my residency, then what I did is I got a job and all this stuff was going good. Okay, I had money, of course, right? All this stuff. So how to say that? Because there was a lack behind scarcity and all this stuff
Okay.
from back home. When I came over here, I started to kind of started buying everything, right?
Okay.
Hoarding everything,
Like a hoarder.
like a hoarder, right? I had
Interesting.
a kind of, you see, I had a house, I got a house, I got two cars, two motorcycles,
Wow.
all sorts of gadgets, toys and everything, right? So
Okay.
it was like a spree going on and on and on and on, right?
Okay.
This was kind of like Adler. He says that the lacks that we have as during our childhood and all the stuff, we try to compensate for them all our lives, right?
Okay.
So coming from Pakistan, from middle class background, of course, I had some lacks,
Some limited
right?
limitations.
Scarcity mindset.
Okay, and that
And when
changed
that changed me, like, of course, I was buying everything and collecting everything,
as,
hoarding everything,
as much
right?
as you could.
Right, as much as I could. Of course, up till that point, I was in kind of overall struggling phase,
Okay.
right? From Pakistan, for example, if you come from there, you have to first graduate, then do your USMLEs, get into residency. It's all struggle, 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 right?
Right.
During all the struggle, I got like abundant material. I got whatever I needed to do, whatever I wanted to do,
You were able
I
to do
did.
it.
I was able to do it, right?
Okay.
But once I achieved everything, right? Then I realized actually I was not looking for the things that I actually ended up acquiring or I was lacking.
So you weren't fulfilled.
I was not fulfilled. Means like I thought that these were the things, whenever I get those things, that status, job, security, and all this stuff, I would be fulfilled. I will be happy. And that's what I was looking for.
Okay.
See? And during this period, I have had a lot of experiences too, of course. Of course, coming to the United States and then exposure to this free society and all this stuff,
Right.
different
Yeah.
experiences and all these things, right?
Okay.
But then I realized actually the thing I was looking for
Mm-hmm.
did not lie in all these things. So that put me into kind of crisis of meaning.
Okay. A crisis of meaning. What does that
Crisis
mean?
of meaning means like, why did I want to get all those things? Why?
Okay.
So that why came about pretty quickly in front of me. I had to face that why.
What did that why come as like a person, a situation, or
Right. I mean, I was feeling like, all right, I have everything and I'm hoarding, and then My closet is full of my clothes and all the stuff, shoes and all these things. But but why did I need all that stuff?
Okay.
Why? Now during this time period, usually what ends up happening is that people do get married
Right.
and then they have children, and
Okay.
that gives them a
So
purpose. See?
that's the answer to most people's why.
Right, right.
Okay.
And then they kind of go with the flow.
Okay.
But my life ended up being like, by nature, I was like that too, but ended up being like I could not get married, did not
Okay.
have children.
Okay.
So at that time, you can imagine where I was standing.
Right.
I had everything, but still, why?
The question was over your head.
Yes,
Okay.
why? Then I realized that I did not actually want those things or that security or that job. I was looking for something else.
Okay. And what was that thing that you're looking for?
Exactly, that was the question.
Okay.
So I started chasing that question.
Okay.
What exactly was I looking for?
Interesting. Okay.
Right? At that time, what I realized that as long as I am trapped into this settled, secure, and all that life that was kind of naturally came as a plug-in from the society or from my lacks, my insecurities, and all the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I'm plugged into that, I will not figure out that why.
Okay.
So then I decided, all right, I'm going to leave everything.
And leave everything means sell your house, get rid of your cars, leave your job. Is that correct?
That's correct. Actually,
Okay.
that's exactly what I did. It took me like 6 months. 6 months.
Okay.
Over a period of 6 months, I came up with this plan that all right, I'm gonna get rid of everything. Okay, and then go back to my pure being.
Your pure being. Okay.
Like, what am I, and who am I?
Okay.
You see, and why would I want to get there? Because of the same reason. Because I did not
Find fulfillment.
fulfill. I did not know my why.
You didn't know your why.
Yeah,
Okay.
why should I do whatever I'm doing?
So you had basically what you're saying is if if I could understand is you had pretty much all that you could get, and usually you're saying at this point people generally get married, have kids, and that answers that question mark. And you did not go down that path. Was that a choice, or was that did you decide you could get married or decide to go on this adventure to find out your why? Was there like a fork in the road? How do you decide between the two?
Well, that's another question. I'll have to go back to the to my youth and all the stuff. I was stuck with some problems, some questions from the very beginning.
Okay.
You see, those were questions of meaning too, as well. You see,
Okay.
like for example, question of impermanence,
Okay.
question of suffering, question of even existence,
Why do
and
we
all the stuff.
exist? All
Oh,
those
yeah, all
things.
that stuff
Okay.
from the very beginning. You see, and then those questions, I was stuck with that. So I had a background in kind of philosophy and
Okay.
asking those questions
Right.
and trying to find those
The
answers and
meaning.
all the
Okay.
stuff. But when uh, I would get into my like profession struggles and all the stuff, making up my career and all those things. You see, life went by so like quickly and all the stuff that somehow I could not get married.
Just
And
didn't happen.
it was my personality was like that too. You
Okay.
see, I was like relatively free spirited, although driven by my sense of responsibility because I was the eldest in my family.
Okay.
And then my parents were like, I mean, they were very nice folks. They trained me well and
Yeah.
taking on my responsibility, and I did that.
Okay.
But once I got to that point where all that programming and all the stuff, the plugged in data kind of expired, I would say. Then
Expired.
I was standing nowhere.
Okay. So
Yeah.
basically you got unplugged? You unplugged yourself, or was there a force that unplugged you, or from what would you say, like a matrix, or
I think Matrix is a good metaphor to that. I realized at that point that actually I am the one who is responsible for whatever was happening in my life.
Okay.
I could not exteriorize blame or externalize anything that happened to me in my life.
Okay. That makes
That's
sense.
what I realized. And then, of course, with those questions, I was digging deep into all these questions. People have asked all these questions before,
Okay.
right? So I'm not coming up with any original thought right now.
Right.
But for example, Carl Jung has this famous thing. He said that we have conscious and unconscious. And
Okay.
conscious is individual unconscious, and then there is collective unconscious.
Okay. Collective
See, collective
unconscious.
unconscious. So whatever we're conscious of, we feel like it's our free will and choice. But whatever is in the unconscious, it appears like a fate out there happening to us.
Okay.
It's like projected out.
Interesting.
See, so that's what happens to us too. So what I mean is this, it was me all along me.
It was always you.
Always me.
And would you say this applies to everyone? Each person, it's always them, or some people not so much, or
I would say so. I agree with Carl Jung in this, that forget about the terms like blaming or guilt or and all stuff. But I think that our higher self, that is the ultimate driver of our lives, is the one running our lives too. It's like
okay,
it might be conscious or unconscious. Like I said, conscious appears to be our own choices, and the unconscious is the one that projects out, happens to us, and feels like an external event happening to us. But
interesting.
actually, it is my own unconscious, or the archetypal pull means like I'm pulling data from the collective unconscious, projecting out, and those things are happening to me.
Wow.
So, bottom line would be, I would say that this was again me, all along me.
Okay. So from the beginning. So you were saying 6 months to get rid of your old self. Is that, get rid of all the things that you had hoarded, and then what happened?
Right. I would not call it metamorphosis at all. What I
Okay.
mean is this, I got this chance right now. I said, as long as I'm plugged into this thing, what I call my life right now,
Okay.
right? I will not be able to find the answers.
Okay. So then you unplugged yourself.
Yes, this was my way of unplugging myself.
Okay.
I said, I'm going to do that so that I could free up to address my questions.
And what were all those questions? Was it purpose?
Right. So now the question, of course, the question the biggest question that we face all the time is question of purpose,
Okay.
question of meaning,
Okay.
right? What is this all about?
Okay.
What drives us?
Okay.
Okay, why do certain things happen to us? Right,
Interesting.
all those questions came up. Right,
Okay.
came up means like they have been always been there. What I mean is this, but what I did is this: I freed myself up to address these questions, freeing from all the setup things that are kind of fed into me as a data, that you need to have a job, house, and the retirement fund and all this. I dissolved everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now would you say you've addressed all your questions? You've answered everything?
Right now, so then I'll have to come up with a way to, all right, when I say that it's me all along me, then I'll have to come up with certain ways to keep in touch with reality, right? That means I'm going to
Okay.
explain it to you. What I
Yeah.
mean is this, I can subjectively think of the world the way I want to think, right?
Okay.
This is going to be my subjective world.
Like a pure relativism.
It's total is my subjective world. Who cares what I think and all that stuff? So I'll have to come up with a way to somehow engage with the reality out there.
Okay.
So that way, I thought of it, and as I was finding the answers to these questions, then I thought, all right, if I have to stay in touch with reality, then I will have to come up with something measurable out there, like in the objective world.
Okay. Okay.
You see,
All
figure
right.
out a way, some way, right?
Okay.
So, so that kind of that thing then put me into different disciplines that I went through, of course, right?
Which are
Which are, of course, I have been with Quran for a long time, like
okay.
pure Quran. I'm a purist, like Quran means, right? Reading the translations first. Now, Alhamdulillah, I
Okay.
understand the Arabic too. So, but with Quran, I was, but along with that, then of course I found teachers. I kind of got into different disciplines, right?
Okay.
Different spiritual traditions, different
Such
philosophical
as
traditions. Like my main, um, of course, whatever comes in play it is, of course, for us as Muslims is the tasawwuf, right?
okay.
It's the Islamic mysticism. But
Okay.
but in addition to that, it was more of a like I would say the Vedanta, for example,
Okay. That's
Upanishads, for
okay.
example, Taoism, for example,
Okay.
Kabbalah,
Okay.
big time, right? It's a different other spiritual traditions,
Okay.
right? So digging deep into as to what is going on, what is going on.
Did diving deep into, all the disciplines or some particular help answer those questions of reality and how to make an objective measure of how you interact with reality?
Right now, so because I was looking for the truth and trying to get to understand the reality, it it came to me that it's very hard to kind of objectify the reality and grasp it in its totality.
Okay.
Meaning, if I decide something and give it what I would call epistemic closure, that make a decision, for example, that this
Okay.
is the way it is.
Okay.
You see, so that is, I think, that has not worked for me.
Okay.
So
What
giving
has worked for you
what has worked for me is to keep everything open
with no answers?
with the best answers I could get.
Okay.
I would call it like the best answer system.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
that means this is the best answer so far I'm getting
Okay.
up till now, but tomorrow it might change.
Do you have some of those answers that you could share for us today about, the questions that you've had?
Right. More important than those questions is okay. What are going to be my parameters to find the answers, the best answers, for example.
Okay.
So my principle would go back to utilitarianism.
Okay.
Useful answers.
Useful
Answers
answers.
are
Okay.
the best answers.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Used for what now?
That's a good question.
Okay. Now, should I use these answers to make me happy?
Hmm.
Am I looking for happiness?
Okay.
So then the next question would be how to define happiness, for example.
Okay.
I
How
might
do
be,
we define happiness?
right, that's a great question now. You see? Now I might feel happy. You see? Anytime I might feel happy. Then in the evening I might feel sad.
Okay.
So the question is, what is happiness?
All right.
It's hard to define. It
Okay.
has an association with pleasure, but
Okay.
if the pleasure is short-lived, it cannot be translated into happiness
Okay. Because
because it's going to go away. It's transient.
so you're saying happiness is like an eternal infinity like
Yes.
sensation.
Yes, it has to have that temporal thing too. As long as there is, for example, end of happy feeling, then there cannot be happiness.
Okay.
So then how would I find my answer to what I'm looking for
So it
example? Well,
can't be
utilitarian.
happiness.
Well, yeah, because it's hard to define happiness.
So you can't get what you can't define,
Right,
and
exactly.
also it's eternal
Yeah, because
because nothing is eternal, at least in this world.
right, because the thing is this: if I am finding happiness, for example, happiness has to have that temporal component. Even if I'm feeling very happy right now, I know there'll be sad moments, for example. So this is not happiness, I would say,
Right.
right? So So what matters?
Well, I'm happy right now.
No,
So
no, that's good. That's good. Happy right now is a great thing. It's a great. Right now, I would say I'm happy too. But at the same time, it has to have that temporal thing. You see
okay.
what I mean? Okay,
So
okay.
you're saying happiness can be temporary and can be eternal?
Well, so what I mean is this: in the definition of happiness, there has to have to be both components. One is the feeling, but sustained,
Sustained
sustained.
until a certain time period?
Until if we anyway, if we know it's gonna end, it cannot be a universal concept of happiness. You see what I mean? Okay.
Okay.
Now I changed my. I looked into nature. Okay, what happens in nature, for
Speaking of
example?
nature, we're surrounded.
Right, we're surrounded by nature now. Now, what? How do I look at nature? Nature, the best example, metaphor, or example I would say is a seed. Seed.
Okay.
Seed grows into a big tree.
Okay.
What do you call it? Do you call it happiness? Do you call it something else?
Well, isn't like a seed an inanimate object? So how does it have feelings?
So no, but what? How would you name this whole process?
Like
I,
like a
I
process of growth?
okay, growth you could say, or I would say it's fulfillment, right?
Okay.
The fulfillment.
So fulfillment for the seed would be becoming the
A
tree.
tree,
Okay.
right? The fulfillment.
So is that your purpose?
Right. I think this is the purpose in nature for anything. And this is what I found should be my uh, purpose or my goal in this life.
Is
Fulfillment.
so so just to recap
Right.
for my understanding, you had a stable job, stable life, and with the stability you were able to, indulge, hoard, but you didn't find like the purpose of your life. You didn't find meaning, and you needed to leave all of that in order to answer those questions. Is it safe to say now you found that answer as in fulfillment?
Yes.
And you could have only gotten that by leaving everything.
Right. The original question was what I'm looking for. Am I looking for good cars? Am I looking for good life or something like that? Now, at least the best answer I have is I was looking for and I am looking for
Fulfillment
fulfillment. At least I have something tangible
to
that
hold on
I
to.
would hold on to.
Okay. And so why is fulfillment so complex?
Right. Now, that's a complex overall idea and concept is this. It is not necessarily filled with pleasure all the time. It's not fulfilled with happiness all the time.
Okay.
It can have pain in it. It can have hurdles in it, challenges in it,
Okay.
and all the stuff, you see? So the question becomes, how do you define fulfillment?
Okay. Seed to tree
Tree,
for
right,
nature. But
right,
for us, it
right.
would be
So exactly. So how do I know that I am becoming who I really am, for
hmm,
example?
like you need some sort of like gauge or measure.
Exactly. That's true. The measure, the measure. So, so how do you define fulfillment? The best answer I could come up with, I can share it with you.
Of course, we love that.
Right. So the fulfillment, I think, is never an end for us. Meaning, like it cannot be like when I would get over here, then I will be fulfilled.
Okay, so it's this like it's a state that we can never achieve, or
No, the way it is that if you're saying that if I, for example, do this, then I will be fulfilled.
okay.
It cannot be. It
It's not a
cannot be for
cause
me.
it's not a cause and effect
Y-
relationship.
Yes, fulfillment is when I know that whatever I want to be, I am on the path
Of
to
being.
of being there.
Okay, so being on a path of trying to be fulfilled.
No.
Okay.
Fulfillment by definition for me, it's my definition, for me is to be on the path of becoming who you really are.
And how do you know who you really are?
Right, exactly. That's true. Now we will go over there as to who we really are, kind of
Okay.
thing. Okay, that is the struggle that we go through every day,
Right.
and then we will talk about that.
Of
You see
course.
what I mean? Okay, but first, fulfillment would mean that I am on the path of becoming who I really am.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a path. It's being on the path rather than
The
the
destination.
destination.
So it's a journey thing.
It's a journey thing.
Okay. All
Right.
right.
So we're getting rid of an idea of a destination over here.
So remove the outcome.
Ye-
Outcome is removed.
Right. We will get there too. It's a part of our system that we might discuss
Okay.
later. Okay.
Yes, of
So
course.
fulfillment. Number two, fulfillment comes from the correction of the past.
Correction.
Of the past.
Okay.
Meaning you are able to see the wisdom in all the events, especially bad events that happen in the past, for example.
Okay. So you're saying that it's kind of like a self-reflection?
It's yes, it's kind of the struggle that you went through was for a reason. For example, you
Okay.
have that trust and you have that contentment, you have that conviction that all that was for good.
And does that stem from like spirituality, from like, you know, either it's Islam or a God or a component of a higher being having things in order? Or does that stem from, because some people may experience things and there may not be any wisdom of that experience, whether it's positive or good or negative currently, but maybe in 10, 20, 30, 100 years, that wisdom, or maybe that's wisdom that's never shared to human, like the human.
Right, you're right about now. What I'm saying is this. So what we're talking about over here is this. It's like overarching kind of rule of God.
Okay.
What I mean, it's like we are talking about the implied rule of God,
Okay.
meaning everything that happened in my past was for a good reason.
For good reason.
Good reason. If you're able to see that,
Okay.
one is you believe in that. But if
Okay.
you see that, right, then you would not want to move all those bad events out of there because those are the events that led to that tree that you're becoming.
Right. So you're okay. Okay. But what if some people don't end up becoming a tree?
Right. So they'll need to work on that to remove the blocks. We will talk about the blocks.
Okay.
Why the blocks?
Okay.
See? So this is about the past. And now about the future,
Right.
for
So we dealt
example.
with the past is we take the wisdom from our everything that has happened in our past
Right.
is good.
Right.
Now our future,
Right. And future is driven by what? Fear. We know fear.
hmm,
See? So that fear is, we do not direct that fear towards the future. That's it.
so don't be fearful of the
Of the
future.
future.
Okay.
Okay. So
Interesting.
what are we doing? Well, it's saying that we are on the path of becoming what we are. Our past gets corrected, and then we have no future fear of the future.
Okay.
This is I would define for myself as fulfillment.
It's kind of like living presently, living in the now, right? Because you're not tethered to fear of future. And you could say that you're forgiving your past or acknowledging your past. I mean, I would say that you like forgive your past or whatever happened, you can't change it. Um, and you're only present in this very moment.
That's correct.
And that would be so you've defined sorry, you've defined your fulfillment as almost like being essentially present in the now.
That is true. Yes,
Okay.
that is true. Because the present is actually eternity.
Okay.
It's
Eter-
actually eternity for you is because that is where you exist.
okay.
You don't exist in your past. You don't exist in your future.
You exist now.
You exist now. What is your position right now defines your state of being.
Okay.
And that state of being, if, like I said, you're on the path of becoming who you really are, your past gets corrected and you have no fear of future, then state of being is called fulfilled.
So, is it safe to say that you are now fulfilled?
Okay, now let's talk about that. Now, can you feel fulfilled all the time? The answer is no.
Okay.
That means that it's always, you have to go back,
Fluctuating?
and center yourself
Okay.
to that position.
Okay. And
You
how
have
do
to,
we center ourselves?
yeah, that's a good question. Now, how to center yourself, go back to. We will talk about, uh, when we talk about the substance
Okay.
of substance of the universe, substance of your being.
Okay.
Then we will get into how to center yourself.
Okay. That
Right.
that makes sense.
Right.
Um, so has there been any mystical experience that has reshaped, your viewpoint on reality?
It's not about a mystical experiences. I would not say the mystical experience. Let me define mystical experience. How I define it.
Okay.
Mystical experience is when your ego falls into your higher self.
Okay.
That is what I call mystical experience.
Okay.
See, so that can happen to people,
Okay.
but that's just your higher self that is kind of waking up. And that starts from where, that again, I'll go back to Carl Jung, for example.
Okay.
It's a he calls his famous phenomenon synchronicity.
Synchronicity. Okay.
Yes, yes. That means that somehow you start feeling that somehow out there the events are following my mind,
Hmm.
my thoughts,
Okay.
right? So these are the experiences that lead to the question of the nature of the reality out there.
Okay.
Is the reality somehow, um, it is is it dependent on my thoughts,
Okay.
or my thoughts are
Reflective of
of
reality.
the reality?
Interesting.
See, so once you go from taking input to applying yourself, then you realize that there is more to your thoughts, more to your mind, or I would say more to yourself, that is somewhere lying in there you were never introduced to, you
Okay.
see, but you start getting like some level of signs, right?
Hmm.
Okay, and then from there, then once you start realizing, and then you start working on your ego, and then your ego starts to dissolve, uh, not I would say rather falling back into the higher self, then you would call it a mystic experience.
Have you experienced one of these?
Well, uh, I have gone through hypnosis sessions and all the stuff. You
Okay.
see what I mean? Okay.
Has that gotten you to for your ego to fall back into your higher self?
Yes, actually, I underwent some hypnosis sessions from some experts. Okay, and then the purpose was this thing, that I wanted to experience how my ego falls back into the higher self, and I could get to know how it feels to be in the pure form of my higher self rather than just ego.
And how was that?
So it's a different experience. A lot of people have that experience, but I think experience is not so important as to important thing is to understand
So
what
you're
it means.
so you're saying that though you did experience it, it wasn't that significant for you?
Right. That was just a confirmation of what I was thinking. I was
Hmm.
thinking means like I had a kind of uh, as a part of my overall my mental model. I would call
Okay.
it a mental model.
This
So,
mental model that you've developed.
right, the mental model. Of course, everybody has a mental model, right? Because science only addresses the things that it can falsify, right? Karl
Okay.
Popper said that.
Right.
Once something is falsifiable, that will fall into the domain of science. Then science picks it up. But before anything is falsifiable, okay, see, you have to have your own mental model.
Or it's like spiritual or religious?
If you call it religious, spiritual, I don't mind, but it has to be, a lot of things are not falsifiable or reproducible or provable or not put in
Hmm.
equations, for example. That's
Okay.
what we call it mental model, for example.
Okay.
You see, physics is looking all the time for theory of everything,
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay, until we find theory of everything, what are we doing? We're coming up with all these mental models, right? So,
So, yeah.
I would have, everybody has a mental model,
So what
right?
is your, and you have a mental model and you've taught it to people. Is that correct? Or a structure, a framework
Mm,
that works to
right.
help people either unplug or
Yeah. So I tried my best to somehow come up with a kind of system.
okay.
Of course, uh, don't take me wrong. Nothing that I'm saying is my original thought. Okay,
So you're
these are
take
masters.
and who are these masters?
Like I told you before,
Like Carl Jung?
Carl Jung is big, okay, and then is Martin Heidegger is another teacher of mine.
Okay.
Upanishads,
Okay.
Taoism, Kabbalah is big, okay,
Okay.
and then of course, um, and then I have a way to kind of, I'm not talking about religious things or anything. I'm not a religious scholar, but Quran also, if I find something, I confirm it with the Quran too. It like falls more in line with Quran, for example.
Okay. Okay.
See, so for example, so so that mental model, then if I apply on live, then I start seeing results. Then I share it with others.
Okay.
See, and then once I share it with others, once they apply, then they start seeing some results too.
And
So
okay.
yeah.
And so you've I already experienced that.
Yes, I think this has worked for me. This is working for a lot of other my friends too. Okay,
Okay.
and so I would say yes, it is. It is. I do see results.
And
See?
the results that you see are like changes of internal emotional states, or is the result becoming fulfilled with one's life, or is the result like achieving a certain worldly, what would be like a typical friend that comes to you and approaches you?
Right now, so if somebody comes to me and asks me a question, okay, what is your mental model, for example, I would say that this is the mental model that I have developed, and I think this works. If you follow it, the way it works is that you will see changes in yourself
Okay.
and then changes in your surroundings.
Hmm. Okay.
So it's not only uh, and only in your nafs, it's all also out there in the afaq,
And nafs is
100% of
soul.
soul inside me
Okay.
and also in my life.
Okay.
In my life.
So what is this framework, if you don't mind sharing it?
Sure, sure. So it stems from the the initial uh, premise I gave you is this: there is one rule in this whole universe, and that's God's rule.
Okay.
See, God's rule. If you have to see the God's kingdom, if you have to see, you'll see it in nature.
Okay.
See, so now you'll ask this question: okay, what is the fundamental substance of nature, for
Hmm.
example?
Okay.
You'll ask this question, okay, what is the fundamental force in nature? Where do you see that? And where do you listen to where do you see that? Where do you hear that? It's a Star Wars, may the force be with you. The force,
Hmm.
what is it in itself?
Okay.
See, now Quran prevents me from talking about, contemplating about, imagining about two things that I will never do. And that's one is God's being,
Okay.
Vajud, right? Laisa kamisli shay, he is beyond and above any other being. We will never talk about that.
Okay.
And his essence, that is his Zat.
Okay.
I will never talk about Zatu. I have no capacity, nobody has capacity to even start even contemplating. We'll
Okay.
always fall astray if we start thinking about God's Vajud or God's zat, the essence,
Right.
being
Okay.
and essence.
Okay.
But what we're dealing with over here is
Something
the
different,
sifat,
which is
attributes,
the
his
attributes.
attributes, his dealing with us.
Right.
We
Okay.
call it, Quran says sunnatullah.
Like the 99 names, you would say.
99 names, and then of course, like the sifat means like, okay, we're dealing over here with a force, something, right? We're
Yeah.
dealing with something. What are we dealing with? Is this a being? Is this a zat? Is this attributes? So I would say it's like attribute. Attribute means sifat. It's a quality. It's a force that we're dealing with.
Okay.
Okay. Now that is what we're dealing with. Sometimes we are kept from doing something. We push hard. We don't do it. Something we're not able to do it, and the force that you feel. Okay,
There's a
what is
push
that?
and pull.
Yeah, what
Okay.
is this? What is this? Now you ask this question. That is the thing we can work with actually, because that's God's dealing with us in this
Hmm.
life.
Interesting.
See,
Okay.
I'm not talking about religion, by the way, over here. Religion deals with definitive things and hereafter and reality of morality and all this stuff, ibadat. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about God's dealing with his creation.
Okay.
So after digging into this question that how come all this, you see all these greenery, all this scenery and all the stuff, you see
Yeah.
what I mean? Okay, it's all a kind of blessing from
Right.
Allah, right?
Okay.
It's like everything is getting something from Allah, right?
Yeah.
So so then I would say the the fundamental substance that I, in my mental model, I call it the will.
The will.
The will.
Okay.
In Arabic, it's irada,
Okay.
the will, right? Right? Or desire.
Okay.
This is Allah's desire. Shah, like it's like you see everywhere, right?
Hmm. Okay.
Like in creation,
In all of nature.
all of nature. You see
Okay.
that, right? Okay. Now, this is the fundamental force. Okay, now look at the desire or will of a tree, for example.
Okay.
What is the will of a tree, for example?
I guess to grow.
Yes, to grow, it needs something. What
It,
are the needs?
it needs like sustenance.
Yeah, it needs water, it needs air, it needs sun, and all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right. As the need arises, right? We call it ihtiyaj. Ihtiyaj means muhtaj. It's like need, necessity for it. It arises, it gets fulfilled.
Okay.
By whom?
By God.
But yes,
Okay.
God provides sustenance,
As
fulfills
it
it.
reaches its fulfillment.
Right. The need arises,
Okay.
and then God fulfills it.
Interesting.
Right? You take your part, and God fills it.
Okay.
Right? It's in nature. So it is will, actually.
The will.
That is prevalent everywhere, and it is flooded with the universe. Our universe is flooded with that will.
Hmm.
You see, somewhere it calls Allah Nuru Samawati wal Ard, for example. It's
Okay.
Allah's nur, Allah's will. It's like surrounding everything. And according to the need of anything, like a tree,
Okay.
like any animals, like everything. You see, it's fulfilled by God's will.
So how do we take this? Is there more to the framework? Or
Right now
that's the first part.
that is the first part.
Recognition of
Right.
nature,
Right.
recognition of God's rule,
Right.
recognition of nature's necessity,
Right.
and then the result of the necessity or the struggle or the growth is the answer would be God's will.
Yes, and then God's will fulfill everything, all the needs, right?
And
Good?
preach the fulfillment
Right.
for that. Okay.
So we're facing that thing, that attribute of Allah. Do you call it
Okay.
Nurullah? You call it God's will, Shah, everything.
Whatever it may be.
It is. We're facing that, right?
Okay.
Right. Big time over here. We're surrounded by that.
Okay.
Okay. There is another problem now. In us, for example, in me, myself,
Yeah.
where do I see that will?
So that's a question you ask yourself, and or you tell your students per se or people to ask themselves?
Right. I mean, this is an open question. How
Where
do I see where is my will?
okay,
Where is my will? How do I see my will? If I get hungry, for example,
okay,
who fulfills it?
okay. Got
God does. God does, right?
couldn't you also say like the beating of your heart and like the existence that your own your
Right.
continuous existence
Right.
without the sensation of feeling hungry is like an endless supply of the will?
Right. That's for nature too, right?
Right,
For,
yeah.
for for trees, for animals, for my
Reality.
heart, for my stomach, for my kidneys, everything is that God's will, God's blessing, and
Okay.
coming. But where when I become conscious, you see what I mean? Okay, where does my will lie? I'll
Now we're
tell
talking
you.
about your will. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, the personal. Now I will say it has two aspects in us.
Okay.
Two aspects. One we call it desire,
Okay.
the the need or desire. It's
Okay.
the same thing. It's the same thing. In animal, it's always need, right? Need. They go, they get hungry, they eat, they do this, that.
Okay.
Okay, okay. In us, that need because of our free will, because of the veil of causality, then we can increase our needs, and then that becomes our desire.
Okay. So the increase of our needs leads to increase of our desire, or the increase of our need becomes desire.
Well, same thing. That what I'm trying to explain is it's in us. Need
Hmm.
and desire is the same thing.
But wouldn't you say like I, for example, want, like a new camera, but I need food, right? My new camera would never suffice as food, which would be like a necessity.
Right, right, right. No, same, but the nature is the same. You
Okay.
need food, you will eat food. You desire camera, if you can get it, you will get camera, for example. Right?
Okay.
Same thing.
But I don't need it.
Oh, but that's a different story. But what I mean, but same thing. But how much food do you need, for example?
Okay.
Okay. Do you need sweets, for example?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
that becomes a desire, for example. The same
Okay.
thing. It's the scale is the same. One
Okay.
is that the other aspect I call this will is intention,
So intention and then
desire.
desire/need.
Well, yeah,
Those are
to
two
to
kind of pillars,
to
as
will,
two aspects of will,
will, yes,
which will then lead to
yes. Now we talk about, okay, what does it mean to have need, a desire and intention?
okay.
Desire is like scalar quantity,
Okay.
and intention is more like a vector quantity.
Hmm.
You see, I'll explain it to you.
Okay.
Like somebody might have a big appetite,
Okay.
big desires.
Okay.
I want to do this, that, and all the stuff, right?
Okay.
Why do you want to do that? The intention will determine.
So the answer to our why is our intention.
Right.
Okay.
Intention, where it is going. I need, for example, I need a helicopter, for example.
I would love a helicopter.
Yeah. And but why? Do you want to fly, or do you want to compete with somebody, for example?
Hmm.
See,
Okay.
all these are intentions.
And those
Intentions.
so those two intentions, one could be like a genuine reason and one could be like an external validation which was less genuine reason.
Right. And the curse of free will is that we can swing our intention any way we want.
Right. Okay.
We might not be free in anything else, but we are free in our intentions.
Our intention is completely free.
Free. I'll tell you how. Now, intentions, what is the intention that you see in a tree, for example?
Mm-hmm.
It's always intention or will to receive. Receive, receive, receive. I have a need, I'm receiving. I have received need, I have received. I have
Okay.
received, received, received. It had never the will to, for example, give.
It okay.
It has never the will to give, for example,
But we do.
receive. Now we are the ones who have both will to receive, but we share the other thing, the desire to give.
Okay.
God has desire to
Give.
give,
Interesting.
to give.
So we also carry that desire.
We have that thing in us. You see, that's where we are different from the other creatures is that we not only have that will to receive, but will to
Give.
share or give.
Interesting.
Give.
Okay.
Okay. Now, what I propose here, that's my first step of my system, is that we should balloon up, crank up, increase our desire in quantity.
Okay. For example, desire of anything?
Oh, what? Yeah, let's talk about that. And now, desire of what? Desire, it has to be desire not to just receive, but receive and share.
So we need to crank up our desire to share
Share.
anything. But whatever we want to share, we have to crank up the sharing aspect.
Sharing aspect.
So
Okay.
that's step one.
That is step one. Cranking up the. Why am I bringing this point up? Because desire is notorious. It has a negative connotation.
Okay.
Mahatma Siddhartha Buddha,
Okay.
he said that desire is the sole source of suffering. We know
Okay.
that, right? So desire for example, the Tasawwuf, they say that, okay, reduce your desires.
Reduce our desires.
Yeah. Be
Okay.
content. Reduce desires. I'm saying the opposite thing.
Interesting.
I'm saying that balloon up the desire.
Crank it up.
Crank it up, but
All
it
the way.
has to be desire to share.
So it's a specific desire. Desire to share. Okay.
Share. Trees and plants and animals, they will just receive and fulfill their needs, but we share that quality with God.
Okay.
That we can share.
We have that same attribute that we could do.
Right.
Interesting.
Exactly. Once we decide that we're going to crank up that desire to share, we kind of become like a conduit to the blessing we're talking about, to the will of God that will not only come to us, but also will
Others.
flow through us, and then kind of will lead to abundance and prosperity in our lives.
Wow. Okay.
Well, this I will have to attribute this point, the differentiating point in the history of mysticism to Kabbalah. By the way,
Can you explain what Kabbalah is?
Kabbalah is a Jewish tasawwuf.
What does the tasawwuf mean? Like
Tasawwuf means mysticism.
Jewish mysticism. Okay.
This is Jewish mysticism.
Okay.
Okay, this is the thing, but it's different from others. Is in other mystic traditions, there is a big emphasis on reducing and killing your desires.
Whereas Kabbalah is cranking up your desire.
Cranking up your desire, but desire to share.
Interesting. Okay.
See?
And why is that different? Why is it different for Jewish? Is there any like reasoning behind that it's different from other mysticisms, or?
Well, what they're saying is this, and they say it correctly, okay? They say it that we have abundance of Allah's blessings.
Okay.
Abundance of Allah's nur.
Okay.
Here.
The light.
The light. Why would we not let it come in our lives?
Okay.
And the instrument of bringing all that nur in our lives is through cranking up our desire.
Okay. Okay.
But desire to share.
Okay. It has to be desire to share.
Yes.
Okay.
Because otherwise you're gonna be like an animal, right? You're gonna just block it. You will get your desires fulfilled, but it will not lead to fulfillment.
Interesting.
It will not.
So that's step one. Are there more steps to this?
Yes.
Module?
Yeah, the mental model.
Modality.
Or steps. So number one, we said we are going to crank up our desire to be able to receive that blessing from Allah and spread it in our lives.
Okay.
Number one, we said.
Number
two, we say that why do we not see that all the time then, right? Right? Everybody, abundant blessing is there. Its abundance is there. Prosperity is there. There's nothing lacking in that. Why don't we see it? We don't see it because of our blocks of ego.
Interesting.
Blocks of ego.
Okay.
And that is the darkness of our ego.
Could you explain what would be some blocks that people have?
Yes, let's first discuss ego. What is ego?
What is ego?
Ego is the fallen state of your higher self.
Okay.
fallen state of your higher self that ends up causing darkness,
Interesting.
that blocks the light from coming into our lives because it has its own agenda.
Interesting. Okay.
That is the higher self forgetting the status of a creation from Allah and taking over the role of God Himself.
Hmm.
We call it God's self,
Okay. Okay.
right? It ends up causing that darkness.
So step 2 would be removing the blocks
Blocks.
on the ego, which is the fallen higher self.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And then how do we do that? We do that by, of course, it's very famous things, removing all sorts of fear, doubt, anger, envy, all that stuff,
So how do we
jealousy.
remove it?
Exactly, because we know that if we're cranking up the desire to share, there will be abundance. We don't need to compete for anything.
So it's kind of like recognition of the blessings that you have in your life.
Yes.
Kind of like gratitude, expressing gratitude is a way to recognizing the blessings and also removing the blocks.
We will talk about gratitude later. That's a fourth step.
Fourth step. Okay.
For the time being, what we're doing is this: we are, under any circumstances, removing the
Recognition.
blocks. Or
Okay.
how does it work? I talked about the intention being a vector,
Yep.
meaning anything that goes this way, self alone, is for me, self alone. It's a block.
Okay.
And
It has to
anything,
be
it's over there. It is there to be shared.
interesting.
It is there to be shared.
So everything should be shared.
Shared.
Just keep
That's it.
sharing.
Sharing. Okay. Because we are in abundance. If we are in abundance, for example, you see what I
Right.
mean? If you have abundance of something, why would you be jealous? Why would you fear? Why would you doubt anything, for
Right.
example?
That's a good point.
Why would you do that? Because you're in abundance already,
Interesting.
right?
So what would be the next step?
So yeah, so blocks, it's very important. This is very, very important step of blocks. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of shadow work.
What is shadow work?
Yeah, it's a concept introduced by Carl Jung again, is shadow. Shadow is our a big part of ourself that is hidden from us because we cannot let it come in the society. It is kind of, it
Like a
is
shunned
unacceptable. Yeah.
shunned
Yes.
version of ourselves?
Yes. Yes.
Like an exiled version of ourselves?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Alienated. We don't want to own it, but it's still there. So but if it does not come out, then we don't get to the higher self in
Huh.
totality. So breaking the blocks requires a lot of shadow work. There is a way and methodology to that. Okay. But at least I can tell you that this is another way. Okay.
Okay.
And that number 3 step, I call it, taken from some other tradition now. It's a,
Which
it's called,
tradition?
it's a, it's a combined, it's a hermetic tradition too. Okay. So it's building a vessel.
Building a vessel.
Vessel. It's building a vessel.
Okay.
Now, let me see. So building a vessel means, like, it's like we are standing uh, on an ocean
Okay.
of milk, for example.
Okay.
How much milk can you take out?
A lot.
Uh,
Maybe
de-
maybe enough for myself,
yeah, depends on how big your vessel is.
like a ship,
Ship, or
boat.
how boat, vessel, how much, how big is your pod, for example. Right, right.
Interesting.
So what we say is this: build a vessel. And how do you build a vessel? By keeping good intentions, getting rid of all sorts of um, blocks that we talked about from building that vessel. Meaning, like, you want to do something, for example. You know, this is the thing that you really want to do.
Okay.
There's certain things that need to be done.
Okay.
So what you'll do is this: you'll reason, you'll plan, you will Make sure that there is a sharing part there. Whatever needs to be done about that, you need to wake up at 4 a.m. for that or anything like that. You will not procrastinate. You will not back off from
Mhm.
doing whatever needs to be done.
And
That's
that's
it.
all aspects of building the
The
vessel.
vessel.
It's like step 1 and 2 feed into step 3.
3, yes.
Okay.
Build a vessel, and then how big a vessel can be. How big a vessel can be?
I guess
It
it's
can be infinite
hmm.
because ocean is infinite. It can be,
Right. Okay.
right?
So we have the capacity to build a limitless vessel.
Yes, you have the capacity to build that, but like I said, you will need hell a lot of desire. It's the same process we're going through and dividing it into all these steps, right, and building the vessel. We
Okay.
can talk about building the vessel and all these steps later in later podcasts and everything if you like to do. That's a
Okay.
different story, but
Okay.
for the
We're
time being
getting a
I'm going to
good
go
introduction here.
for the time being. Okay, and then step number 4.
Okay.
Step number 4 is gratitude.
Yes, we talked a little bit about that earlier.
Right. Gratitude, what does it mean, gratitude? Gratitude means like, now once you start doing all these things, being in your authentic state, removing the blocks, cranking up your desire, start building vessel, you'll start seeing positive results.
And when you see results, then you are grateful, or you should be grateful before you even see anything.
Gratitude is it is a famous phenomena. Everybody says that be
Grateful.
grateful, gratitude that becomes like part of sharing. That's gratitude too, right?
Hmm.
Sharing. But this is, I'm talking about one another thing. Now try to get it. Okay, try to understand it. Once you start seeing results,
Okay.
don't get surprised. Don't go that it was by chance, it was an accident. Oh, maybe I'll see and all stuff. No, if you see $1 like popping up, for example, okay, gratitude should be like million times more.
Hmm.
That means that if you block it, that abundance coming to you at that time, don't
Blocking it
show
in the sense of not being grateful.
not being grateful, not being enough grateful. I'm taking multiply that
Like be
gratitude.
extremely grateful,
Yes.
and your gratitude is directed towards God.
Oh, yeah, of
Okay.
course, God, of course. Gratitude means thank God. Whatever you get, try to share it. Be good, happy about it, and it's given to you.
Okay.
See? And number 5 step, I'm going to tell you, this is, I think, one of the most important steps. I
Okay.
kept it
Step
for the last
5, is it
5.
the last step, or is
Last
it
step.
this
Last
is
step.
the most important
Most
step?
important step. This is totally and completely detach yourself from outcomes.
Completely remove yourself from outcomes.
Completely remove yourself from outcomes
Why would you do that?
because outcomes are never under your control.
Okay.
Having trust in Allah means that whatever you did, building all these things, you will get rewards,
Okay.
but it might not be there. Nothing went wasted.
Okay.
See, so
Okay.
outcomes is none of your business. It is always under God's direct control,
Right.
under His rule, and it is based on His higher wisdom that you might not understand,
Okay.
right? And reconciling yourself with this idea. Otherwise, it'll fall into kind of shirk.
Hmm. Interesting. It's kind of like um, just recognizing that the more that you do and your intention to do good and just focusing on yourself, focusing on the effort, kind of simplistic ways in this structured plan is so step 1 is the intention to share. Step 2 would be removing any kind of insecurities or blocks, and then step 3 would be building your vessel, which would be the culmination of all the 2 3 steps. um, Step 4 would be the gratitude of any sort of blessing coming in. You be extremely thankful to God. And then step 5 be, even if you don't get anything, you don't even look at any results.
Absolutely 100% detachment from outcome.
And so this is the model that you say that you have developed, or you pulled together from different disciplines, different belief systems, different traditions, and compacted it, and it's worked well for you to make you fulfilled.
Yes, yes, it led to fulfillment for myself. If I divert from this model, for example, if I sometimes get attached to outcome, then I go off balance. If I lower my desire, if I fall into some block
Hmm.
of competition, doubt, fear, or if I um, become lazy, procrastinate. You
Okay.
see what I mean? Okay, so then then I go off track, and that fulfillment goes away.
And you've also noticed this with people that have approached you, or friends that approach you, or family that has approached you, that ask you to help them become fulfilled in life?
Yes, I think the friends I worked with, it has led to a lot of abundance in their businesses.
Okay.
It has led to that sense of fulfillment. It
Okay.
has led to a sense of freedom,
Okay.
a lot of freedom, and a trust, overall trust. That means that nothing will ever happen by accident to me.
Everything was
What
intended.
it is under
God's
higher
rule.
wisdom. It is you can live in peace, meaning with full trust.
Hmm.
Not like you're gonna just somewhere fall and then you're gonna hit your head and then you're gonna do that. And also, there are going to be no accidents. There are actually no accidents.
Interesting. Are you open to other people reaching out to you to help them? Excuse
See,
me.
yes, inshallah, of course. That's fine. I'm a full-time professional. I work too. Yeah, right.
As a
And
physician,
as a physician, and then I have other things too. But anytime if I can help anybody,
you're
right?
open.
I'm inshallah open. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how have you noticed that this fulfillment has helped you in your other jobs, like being a physician or treating patients, or this model
Right. So I pay attention to my overall desire, like I said. Early in the morning, for example, it has to be cranked up.
all the way?
It's all the way cranked up. The desire to share, for example. You
Okay.
see what I mean? Okay. So it has to be like that. Okay. And then the anything got rid of altogether the idea that something bad will happen today, for example.
Interesting.
The fear and doubt blocks of
Those are
ego.
our natural blocks that we have.
I,
You
I
remove
complete
them.
totally. I have to tune myself up in the morning, cranking up my desire and removing the blocks, and then making sure that building a vessel, meaning I say I don't care how I feel, I don't care what I think. I only care about what needs to be done, and I'm gonna do it. That's it.
Very, very determined, and you
That's it.
have this module that you practice every day, like a routine, and you've noticed that it's led you far, far away from where you used to be. The man who used to be kind of tied down by the structures of society. Now that you've found fulfillment, is it possible to go back to that sort of life where you get tied down again, or you're on a train that's far away from that?
That is by if you see the other uh, lifestyle, that is a lost battle already. You see
It's
what I
already
mean? Okay,
lost.
it's already lost, is because the thing is this: it's a. I mean, if you do everything, I mean, La Jolla Beach, San Diego. If you have a mansion over there, take it, live over there. You will see in 6 weeks you'll be done, man. It will lose that level of charm. For example, you see what I mean? Okay, okay,
Basically, you're saying if you get what you're looking for,
yeah.
or like maybe like no work, or just chilling or relaxing or vacation, endless vacation will result in humans' own, default.
Right now, I would say is this. Again, if we go back to fulfillment, we're not going after any destination, right? We are following a path. That's
Right.
our goal, right?
Okay.
And that is the path on which we are fulfilled if
Oh,
we are walking that path, right? If we divert from that path, meaning like we go into that phase where we say that, all right, that's fine. I'm not going to work. I'm not going to be productive. I'm not going to be, I have plenty of money. Why should I work, for
right.
example, and all the stuff, you see? Okay. That will definitely lead to diversion from the path of fulfillment.
Interesting.
It will lead to that. So I highly recommend that because we are, we, our path, being on the path is fulfillment in itself. So that's why I highly recommend that we continue to walk the path.
Hmm.
There is no destination apart from being
On the
on
path.
the path.
Okay. Wow. So, how can people reach out to you if they're interested in learning this process or just asking you more questions on how to become fulfilled?
Yeah, this is my first podcast with you, as you
Inshallah,
know.
one of many.
It's it's the
Do you have
first.
an email or that you're willing to share or some other form of
Okay, okay. Yeah, I will give you my email and you can share on your
Okay, we can
pad.
list it right here,
Right,
an
right.
email.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, we're losing a little bit of daylight,
right, right.
but I think we had a really good, you would say like a taste of what is to come and of what fulfillment is. I know there's a lot more topics that we had, but I think this was an amazing experience. Is there anything left that you would like to say, anyone who's listening to this? Last bit of tip that they can hold on to a pearl from the wisdom that you've achieved through completely unplugging.
Right. I would suggest to everybody, it's my piece of advice is this: do not believe in any other rule except God's own one undivided rule. That's it. And then you will have the taste of life.
That's it.
That's it. I'm not talking about in religious terms at all.
You're talking in reality
At at,
terms,
at the level of being.
at the level of being. There's no other rule except God's rule.
There are no accidents and there is no other rule.
Okay. Well, thank you
That's it.
so much,
You're welcome.
Ali.
Thank you very much,
Assalamu alaikum.
Muhammad.